This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. I always like to bring on guests outside of the Cleveland Browns bubble to get a better perspective of some of the games coming up. This week, the Browns play the Arizona Cardinals. Interesting matchup. Two teams in interesting places, not only at the quarterback position, but just in general. And to do it, I'm going to bring in Donnie Druin. He covers the Cardinals for Fan Nation Sports on SI.com. Donnie, tell us, what about this Cardinals team do you think we might not know because it just doesn't get covered nationally?
This team plays hard, and I know that feels like a real freshman football kind of message vibe to it, but the organization went under a crazy rebuild this past offseason. Cliff Kingsbury, the former head coach, gone. Steve Keim, the former general manager, gone. They really stripped down the roster. Big names like Isaiah Simmons and DeAndre Hopkins no longer on the team. The future depending on Kyler Murray, but I'm sure we'll get to him in a little bit. But case in point, this team was not supposed to contend at all in 2023. And despite their 1-7 record, they've been in every single game that they've played in. They have pushed teams almost to the brink of defeat. But I mean, when you are so overly matched on talent on each side of the ball, game planning and coaching going to take you so far, right? Especially in the National Football League. And I know it's a week-to-week league, but we've yet to see this Cardinals team really kind of be blown out over the course of 4 quarters. And I think if you're a Cardinals team hoping to get Kyler Murray back and building around him, that's at least exciting for the future, just looking at 2024 and beyond.
Yeah. Now, speaking of 2024 and beyond, the Cardinals made a choice here to go with Clayton Tune until Kyler Murray can get back. One, have they brought in somebody to be the game day active backup if Kyler Murray is not going to play? And two, what do you know about Clayton Tune from what you've seen of him in college at Houston and in the preseason?
Yeah, so the team actually this morning, I think 30 minutes before we hopped on, signed Jeff Driscoll. He was on their practice squad before Kyler got back. The team moved him just so Kyler can get those practice squad reps, brought him back. So it's expected that Tune is going to be starting if Kyler is not 100%. And then Jeff Driscoll, the former Florida quarterback, is probably going to be Tune's backup if Kyler can't go. There's still a small chance Kyler Murray might play in Cleveland. I don't think that's super likely, and the national reports seem to indicate that as well. So it does look like it's Tune time for the Cardinals, at least for 1 week. Clayton Tune played at Houston, that typical air raid offense where he puts up a lot of numbers, a lot of passing touchdowns, all that good stuff. Preseason, he showed a little bit of athleticism, the ability to, extend plays. To be honest, though, man, I was not super impressed with him. He really did not, have that kind of touch you're looking for out of an NFL quarterback, at least outside of the numbers. Inside of the numbers, he was pretty accurate, but he was a little bit inconsistent. My biggest gripe, though, and granted, 5th-round rookie quarterback, right? He doesn't progress through his reads super well. If his first read is not there, he doesn't really have the mental capacity to check down or to move to option B. And he tends to stare down his reads a lot. We saw that over the course of all 3 preseason games. I saw it with my own eyes in training camp. So, you don't have a lot of expectations out of a day 3 pick starting at quarterback on the road against a very, very tough Browns defense. And I think it's going to be a pretty tough day for Clayton Tune.
Now, you guys made the move to get off of Josh Dobbs, and it's been interesting because Josh Dobbs, since we traded him to you guys for the 5th-round pick, there's always been this conversation about should the Browns have kept him, should they have not, and he has played relatively well for what you would expect out of Josh Dobbs this season for you. Do you think that this move off of Josh Dobbs was just strictly we want to get assets, so we want to just be able to trade him, or was this a vote of confidence in the direction of Kyler Murray? Because it's hard for me to believe that it was we got to get Clayton Tune out there in this situation. No, 100%. I feel like it's either hey, we think Kyler's going to come back. Somebody might be willing to flip us a draft pick for Josh. We can live with Clayton Tune for a game.
You hit the nail on the head 100%. I think it's a combination of both. I think to know Kyler Murray is very much close to returning, whether that's this week against Cleveland or next week at home against Atlanta, which is kind of the date everybody's been circling from the get-go. And also, I
Hmm.
do think they wanted to see what they have out of Clayton Tune with the trade deadline being Tuesday. They figured, hey, we can probably live with Clayton Tune for a game. It's a good opportunity to see where he is at in his progression, going from a fifth-round pick to where he's at in the middle of the season now. And I think it was a combination of those things. We did give up a fifth-round pick for him. I think Monty Ossenfort, the general manager, wanted at least something back at draft capital-wise. Also, Josh Dobbs probably wanted to go somewhere where he might be able to play for the rest of the season. Kirk Cousins with that Achilles injury, he'll be competing with Jaren Hall for the starting quarterback job in Minnesota. So I think it's probably best that both parties moved on from each other. But no, I think Kyler Murray being on the return definitely helped make that decision easier.
Definitely, definitely. All right, let's look up the matchups for this week. The Browns run game finally started getting going against Seattle this week. They've had big numbers because they've had a couple big runs, but this is the first game they've been able to consistently run. I saw that Gus Edwards, I mean, he didn't have like the most crazy day against you guys when it comes to rushing yards because he had like 80, but he did have 4 touchdowns. When you look at this Cardinals team and you look at their record, what are the things on the field that make you go, this is why they're 1-7?
Yeah, man. It's just lack of talent. And I know, we keep feeding a fed horse, but man, you look at their defense, they just got Buda Baker back from injury reserve. Jalen Thompson is a pretty good safety in his own right, too. Cornerback depth, not there at all. Kaiser White has been a phenomenal presence at middle linebacker for this Cardinals team. But you look along the defensive line, pass rushers, hit or miss sometimes. David Collins made that transition from inside to outside linebacker. He's played well, but doesn't really have a whole lot of moves in his pass rush arsenal. BJ Ojulari, the second round pick, has flashed something here and there. Dennis Gardeck, a main special team stay. I think he's had like 4.5 or 5 sacks on the season thus far. There's a handful of okay contributors, but there's no, I mean, to use a Madden term, X factor, right? Like, and nobody in that front seven is going to make you game plan for them. Nobody is going to stick out like this perennial player that you have to kind of focus on in order to move the chains. And to be honest, I think that's exactly why teams such as the Baltimore Ravens and everybody else have been able to gash the ears on the Cardinals. That they, the Cardinals offense does not exactly do them any favors. They put them in short fields, short drives on their end. The defense is out for sometimes 65 to 70 plays a game. That certainly wears over the pace of 4 quarters. So I just think no offensive help to keep them in the game on top of just lack of talent, to be quite frank, has led a lot of teams to see success against the Arizona Cardinals.
Let's flip it to the offensive side of the ball. Now, it used to be for the Browns, at least on offense, like every conversation would start with Nick Chubb. But now, since Nick Chubb's out, we don't know when Deshaun Watson's coming back. The one guy on this Browns team to have a conversation about, and I think every coach circles, is 95, Myles Garrett. When you look at the Cardinals and their plan to go up with Myles Garrett, what do you think that's going to look like, and how do you feel about your line's ability to withstand an attack from him?
Yeah, man. Getting the 5th-round rookie at quarterback certainly does not help that. I do expect the Browns to be very, very aggressive in terms of game planning for him. If I'm the Cardinals, I mean, James Conner's still on injured reserve for another week, so it's not like your rushing attack's been super, super strong, right? Their offensive line has, kind of decreased in play the last couple of weeks. You still have Marquise Brown and Michael Wilson in the receiving core. They do like to get nifty with Rondale Moore, the slot receiver, will tell you that. He'll probably take handoffs 4 or 5 times out of the backfield in the game, out of shotgun. So just kind of be prepared for that. Excuse me. What to do about Myles Garrett? I think the best thing you do, identify him as the Mike, run to the opposite side of him, keep things short and sweet. Probably, a lot of quick 3-step drops, a lot of one reads, a lot of screen passes. When you have a certified game wrecker like him, when you have arguably a top 3 NFL player right now, regardless of what side of the ball he's on, that changes a lot. And you really need to get the ball out of Clayton Tune's hands sooner rather than later to ensure he doesn't not stop him completely, but at least try to minimize the damage a little bit.
Now, given that Clayton Tune is a rookie quarterback, I think that's one of the hardest things for rookie quarterbacks to do is be able to get rid of that ball quickly, especially if they're playing a team that doesn't play that much zone. And the Browns usually like to be in that 70% man area. So given that, it's like, hey, if you throw Clayton Tune out there, he's going to have to get rid of the ball quick. Like, are you worried that he's going to throw into some traps? Like, what do you think how do you think
100%.
the offensive coordinator is going to try to protect Clayton Tune in a situation where you can't hold on to the ball, but like you also can't trust him to throw it quickly because you just can't trust what he thinks he's going to see?
Yeah, luckily, offensive coordinator Drew Petzing has done a really good job of trying to establish a balanced identity just in terms of running the ball, setting up the play action, and touching back on Josh Dobbs here for a little bit. That's what led to a lot of his success early on in the season with Arizona. You know, they were running the ball super strong with James Conner. You know, he was having 95, 100-yard rushing days. And that really kept the defense on its toes, that a lot of play action to be more effective than it should have been, and a lot of open passing lanes for Dobbs to find. And without James Conner, with the offensive line's play kind of deteriorating over the last couple of weeks, on top of the rookie quarterback, on top of Cleveland's phenomenal defense, right? You run into a problem to where, sure, you can try to establish the run. You're probably not going to with Amari DiMercado and Keontae Ingram and maybe even Damian Williams if he's healthy. They're against the Cleveland Browns defense. You probably find yourself in a situation to where you're going to be down 10-0, 14-0, maybe early. And I mean, do you flip the switch? Do you try to go pass heavy at that point? Do you try to stay committed to the run? Like how often do you do something until it doesn't work, right? Mm-hmm. And then that turns into a one-dimensional team. And obviously, Clayton Tune, I already touched on his inability to progress through reads. He is nowhere near a polished passer. And yeah, I do think he's going to stare down a couple of times, at least a receiver. I do think he's going to try to force balls into a window, and I think that'll lead to probably 2 or 3 turnovers for the Cleveland Browns defense.
Now, if you're looking at this from a Cardinals perspective, what do you think their roadmap to victory is? Like, what has to be successful for them, and what do the Browns need to kind of fail in order for the Cardinals to walk out of Cleveland Browns Stadium with a win?
Yeah, turnover-free football first and foremost, man. Like if you do not win the turnover battle on the road in Cleveland, it's just not going to happen for you, right? And number 2, we kind of already discussed it, but just establishing the run, because if you let Myles, Garrett and company pin their ears back for 3 quarters, it's not going to end well. It's not going to end well for the offensive line. It's not going to end well for the Cardinals receivers trying to get open. It's just a lose-lose across the board. So if they're somehow able to keep themselves balanced over the course of 4 quarters, if they're able to find any momentum running the football and trying to keep themselves 50-50 in terms of what they're going to be play calling wise, I think we'll have a better shot at winning.
It's going to be an interesting game this Sunday. The Browns definitely need this one. They have Baltimore and Pittsburgh back to back after this game as well. So it's like you want to build a cushion to be able to lose that Baltimore game if you're not going to go into having Deshaun, especially since you're playing them at M&T Bank Stadium. It's just a tough one. Let's talk about this Kyler Murray situation, because I just find this fascinating with how they're handling him. He's been what? Was he been categorized as like full at practice a couple of times leading up to this week? Yeah. Like what's been the plan with him? How much of this is stuff that you knew that they were going to go about this from the plan that they set out in the offseason, and how much of this is new with Kyler?
Yeah, so it's funny because before the season started, you had kind of 2 trains of thought. You had people saying that he wasn't going to play at all in 2023, and then you had the people convinced that he was going to return by week 1, right? All of us who are in the facility every day, everybody who actually covers the team, kind of knew it was going to be like meeting the halfway, right? Like he's going to play in 2023. The Cardinals need him to at least show them that he's at least the franchise quarterback, or at other teams that he's healthy for the trade purposes down the road. And to ask Kyler Murray to be ready for week 1 after tearing his ACL and meniscus in week 14 of last season when he had surgery in January, that would have been quite the stretch. So we all kind of thought it would have been a meet in the middle category. So 2 weeks ago, he was designated to return. So the 21-day practice window opened up for him. He was limited. He did practice all 3 days the first week of last week. He practiced fully no injury issues, nothing at all. But they still ruled him as doubtful before eventually ruling him out. They have the entire week this week against Cleveland to activate him. And then if not, I think next Tuesday, November 8th, he has to be elevated to the active roster. So everybody believes, and I kind of already touched on this earlier, he could play in Cleveland. He probably won't. But Atlanta is kind of that big, circle date on the calendar everybody thought he would return from. And they certainly did not want to rush him back. And they were adamant from day one. They know how much of a valuable asset he is for either Arizona or maybe another team in the NFL. It just did not make sense to kind of rush him back and try to get him on the field. But I mean, we already kind of touched on it a little bit, right? I mean, new offense, completely new, scenery. He's coming back. Guys with that significant injury normally aren't themselves upon returning. Obviously, you have the Adrian Peterson case, but I don't think Kyler Murray is exactly Adrian Peterson physically, right?
He's
really interesting,
smaller.
man. Yeah, man. And for a quarterback who relies so much on his playmaking ability, who relies so much on his legs, it really is going to be interesting to see how he comes back from that.
You know which leg was injured? Was it his lead or his hind leg when he throws? Like his left or right leg?
I think it was his right leg that he injured. So it would be his hind leg.
Yeah, because if it was that front leg, I think that would be something also to be extra concerned about. Because that front leg, I think people don't understand. Like, just because your knee isn't your shoulder, like it matters when you twerk that football. Like, if your plant leg can be stable, right, to plant off of it. And that's sometimes something where these guys quarterbacks come back from ACL injuries, and they can't throw as hard as they want to because they can't plant on that leg with as many variations and as confidently as they want to. But it being his back leg, like he just got to whip it around. That's something you can get comfortable with. But yeah, I mean, anybody who's tried to throw a punch after a knee injury would know, like that twerk that you have to do with your front leg, your knee's not going to hold up to that, and your ACL is not 1,000% back, or you're not going to punch as hard until that. So it's always interesting to look at these injuries with different angles, and I think the Adrian Peterson thing did ruin like a generation of ACL injuries because now we react to it. Yeah, we react to it like it's a muscle strain. Like, he'll be back in 9 weeks. He might play for the playoffs. This used to end careers. This injury, right? Like, I think the only equivalent kind of injury, and it's even getting this way with Achilles injuries, is like that, right? An Achilles injury, you go, okay, like we don't even know what this dude's ever going to be again after that. And it's just so weird. Like the second medicine like catches up to stopping ACL injuries from being this career-threatening, career-ending thing, Achilles injuries skyrocket out of nowhere. Like it's weird. Like, I guess you can't mess with nature. It's the best way to put it, because how many Achilles injuries have we seen in the last 3 years, man?
Dude, at least for prominent quarterbacks this year, we've seen two with Rodgers and Kirk Cousins. And
then J.K. Dobbins had an Achilles injury. It used to be you can count like one every 3 years you will get an Achilles injury. But it's like now it's like, man, every other week it feels like somebody pops their Achilles, and I'm pretty sure there's more on there. And it's like and I wonder too, with the whole turf conversation with this, how much of it is the turf that they're actually playing on, and how much of it is a turf that they spent most of their lives playing on? Because how many, like, I remember when I was in high school like 10 years ago, it was not common to see a high school team with a turf field, 100%. Right? Now it's all you ever see, right? All these sports complexes got built for multiple teams, and everybody plays on turf, practices on turf, and they're doing that at a very young age where their body's still developing, or they play college a ton on turf. Even at the lower levels, now all of these teams have turf. And I think that, like, the turf that you play on in the NFL, I don't know how much that changes things, unless like you have like a 10-year career or something like that. But I think a lot of this, because it's happening to younger guys, I'm like, man, some of this has to be that we're playing on way too much turf early on in people's careers. And I wonder if they'll ever like look into that element of it, because the NFL can change to all natural grass. I don't know if that changes what happens before they get here.
Yeah, no, that's completely true. But when you have so many NFL players, I mean, it's not like a 55-45 split. No, it's like a 95-5 split of players who absolutely hate that artificial turf, man. I think you raised a really good point too, is that whenever I played high school football, dude, we were playing on fields where you had to pick rocks up out of the grass and just throw them out. I mean, now, these kids have these pristine artificial, fields that are, pretty common. And just when we were growing up, that wasn't exactly common. We all played on, I feel like, natural grass. And I mean, obviously, we don't play at the pro level, but there's got to be the minute differences that make the most difference between natural and the artificial playing surface. And to your point, man, isn't it cheaper to upkeep the artificial turf fields, and that's why some teams are going towards it?
Well, it's a interesting because you look at it from like lower levels of it, it's more expensive up front, but cheaper over the long term to have the turf, right? Versus natural grass. Now, if we're talking about like pristine Kentucky bluegrass and stuff that they play on in the natural grass stadiums in the NFL, or what the Arizona Cardinals do with like this special grass that they have invented.
It's a weird combination, man, but I wouldn't praise the Cardinals grass too much. There's been a handful of injuries here at State Farm Stadium. Then obviously everybody remembers the Super Bowl field, but that was a completely separate field that the NFL grew themselves.
Yeah, so it's like you get these like weird concoctions because you're trying to fit grass into indoor stadiums, and that part of it is a lot more expensive. And I don't think it's just like the expense part. It's the fact that then you have natural grass, you have to maintain natural grass, which means you can hold less events and different types of events you can't really have. You can't have Beyonce there on Thursday and play a game on Sunday, right? Like you're going to have to, it's going to make some things inconvenient on the business end of things. But if you build football specific stadiums, like you've been building them, and it's not like these stadiums get used in most part, like Cleveland Browns stadium's open air. So it only gets used like 10 times a year at best. And that's if you get your 2 preseason games. So it's just one of those things where it's like they should do it because they have the money to do it. And there's really no reason for them not to. Like it inconveniences you. Well, like join the rest of the world that gets inconvenienced. But yeah, I just worry about it when it comes to those lower levels because it's easy to do that with the NFL. They have the money. And even like top level college football, like Alabama, Ohio State, Big Ten football, they can afford to go back to natural grass because most of those teams are outdoors anyways. It's like when you get to the Mountain West schools, when you get to the FCS schools or the Division II schools, and then obviously the high school programs, that's where it's like, how do you stop those kids from playing on so much turf? And that's where it becomes a little bit more complicated because, as you pointed out, it used to be like you would hear rumors of the school that had turf. You'd be like, oh, yeah, it always be like a Catholic.
You get there with your equipment off the bus. You're like, oh, like this is, yeah.
Yeah, everybody touching it. Like, what's this rubber stuff? Like, you're like, oh, yeah, like, oh, I heard St. Thomas got turf. And it's like, yeah, and then your coach making a big deal out of it. We're on turf. Make sure you got the right shoes, everything else like that. And now it's like kind of expected that you play on turf. Like, even the cleats have changed to where like there's no such thing as a turf cleat. Like every cleat is a turf cleat, so it's just changed that much. And I wonder how much of that has to do with all these Achilles injuries happening to guys like that. There's like even Kirk Cousins, like at 35, that's a little young to be having these Achilles injuries pop up. And that's the worst time, honestly, because at 35, that's when quarterbacks tend to drop off. And you got an Achilles injury. The Bears are going to sign him. That's all I can say.
Yeah?
I think the Bears are going to. The Bears have proven themselves to do stuff that you're like, man, I wouldn't do that, but okay.
That's fair. No, that's
so and the fair. Bears, like I can see him signing to the Bears, like staying in that division. Yeah, I can see him signing to the Bears and the Bears being like, we're going to fix this quarterback situation.
I mean, awfully nice for him to mentor Caleb Williams.
Look, the bad luck of it too is like they'll go in on like Marvin Harrison. Like this has happened to the Browns before. We sign Jeff Garcia, right? And we're like, we're going to get Jeff Garcia. That's going to be our quarterback of the future. And since we have our quarterback, we're going to take Kellen Winslow in the 2004 draft and not even think about drafting Ben Roethlisberger or anybody that was available in that draft. And Jeff Garcia looks like Jeff Garcia. And Keller Winslow doesn't play for his first 2 years because he got injured. And you end up in a bad spot. And I'm like, man, I can see those scenarios coming a mile away. And I can see them going like, hey, we got to take Marvin Harrison Jr. And if we just get decent at quarterback, we going to be all right. Like they're going to sell themselves on the classic Kirk Cousins dream. Right? And that's a recipe for resentment and regret. And I think that they're probably going to go ahead and do that. Like, I'll put the money down if I could bet it on Kirk Cousins being a Bear. But thank you for coming on, talking a little Cardinals with us. Anything else you want to get out about this Cardinals team before you head out, man?
Nah, Matt, I think they're in a good position for 2024. They got $66 million in cap space. They got 6 picks into the first 3 rounds of next year's draft, 2 of them being first-round picks. Monty Ossenfort looks like a competent general manager. So, I think regardless of the 1-7 record, my man, I think the Cardinals are, definitely doing the rebuild the right way. And I think people in Arizona just need to learn patience, man. And, hopefully they can trust the process and everything will pay off. But for now, Cardinals are not a good football team. And if I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, especially with those 2 tough divisional matchups you'd pointed out, I'm licking my chops at this kind of, quote unquote, get right game.
Mm-hmm. And look, for Cardinal fans who might be watching this video who need the extra hope, the Browns in 2016-17, they won 1 game out in 2 years, right? We all know about 1-31. But that 1-31 got you Myles Garrett, it got you David Njoku, it got you Denzel Ward, and it got you Nick Chubb. And you don't get Denzel Ward and Nick Chubb if you don't have those extra picks that you accumulated, because, it might have made you worse in the long front. Sometimes it's better to sacrifice a chance at 7-10 to go and get those extra assets. And I think that's
100%.
Perfect example of it.
You do not want to be stuck in football purgatory, right? Like you either want to be bad enough to get one of the top picks, or you want to be good enough to compete in the playoff spot. Like you don't want to be like the Jeff Fisher St. Louis Rams. They're like 8-8 every year, right? And kind of stuck in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Or if you're like, hey man, if we just get a dude here or there, you know what I mean? Like
get a Kirk Cousins,
yeah. And then you end up making these kind of mistakes. So yeah, it's just one of those spots where it's like, hey, you just gotta be patient, work it out. The good position for the Cardinals is that, hey, you're choosing between Kyler Murray or potentially 2 of the better prospects we've seen since Trevor Lawrence, right? So there's worse places to be in, right? Like, you could trade for a former Pro Bowler and not know if he's good or not 2 years into the trade. You could be in that life, so it's 1-7 right now, but I think better days are ahead for the Cardinals. Thank you for coming on, man. Let us know where we can find you.
Yeah, find me on Twitter at Donnie Druin, DONNIEDRUIN. Then you can follow all of our work at allcardinals.com or SI.com/NFL/Cardinals.
All right. Appreciate you, man. Thank you for coming on. You guys have a great day and have an even better night at home.